I want to do now a brief introduction for the first speaker today, who is going to be Cecilia Harold. Cecilia is a fourth year in SACNAS. She is our chair of professional development, and she's going to share with you her journey into science, what she did from a young age, and what inspired her and what led her into the amazing field of science as it is today. Like I said, if you have questions, please put into the chat, and we're very excited to answer them. So that being said, I'm gonna stop sharing this and hand it over to Cecilia.
So yeah, my name is Cecilia Harold, and today I'm really excited to share a little bit about my personal history, and I've titled it Translating My Proteins, and that'll be a little bit more apparent as I go along. And really kind of my story begins in Melbourne, Florida, which I highlighted on this map of the United States, because that is my hometown, and my hometown is really important to me. It still is where my family is. So it's somewhere that is really integral to who I am. And it's where that my story has started. So that's kind of where my beginning is. And so that's basically the question is, where did I start? So you might think of Florida as kind of like, okay, like, you went to the beach a lot and you should be like blonde and tan and good at surfing and things like that. But in actuality, I actually really spent a lot of my time in the library. It was where my oldest sister worked, and both of my parents worked a lot. So to kind of keep the rest of us out of trouble, I would go with my oldest sister to the library. And so I really fell in love with reading from a young age, really thanks to her guiding me. And that is actually kind of my first inkling of loving science and getting interested in science actually came from reading fiction books. And one book in particular that kind of sparked my interest was this book called Peeps. And so this basically was the premise of what happens if you became a vampire because you had a parasite. So that's like an infection of a really tiny organism that lives inside of you and kind of like feeds off of your nutrients and coexists with you. And so this author posited the question of what happens if you became a vampire because you had a parasite. And the really interesting part of this book is that along with the story, this fictional story, is that between each of the chapters, he actually had real life factual chapters about real world examples of parasites. And I actually found the parasites more interesting than the book. Not to knock the author, the book was also phenomenal, but I was very, very interested in all of these different parasites. And I ultimately was actually able to meet this author and honestly kind of scared him with how much I was interested in parasites. But that kind of started my first inkling towards wanting to know more about science and being interested in our universe and even the microorganisms in our universe, these really tiny things that we can't really see with the naked eye sometimes. And also, just by virtue of where I grew up in my hometown, I grew up very close to Cape Canaveral, which you might be familiar with, is where the rocket launches happen. And so just by virtue of being there, I got to see all of these rocket launches happening and being near NASA. Is just by virtue of being close to them, we would have field trips sometimes, and being able to actually go to NASA and see behind the scenes what it was like to be an astronaut and actually see up close and personal. So I was very fortunate to be able to live close by to what I find very interesting, which is space travel. And I'm sure a number of you find space and the planets very interesting. So I was very fortunate to be able to grow up quite close to NASA and be able to expand my interest past microorganisms and parasites. But I grew out of the beach and went to other topics. And that's really where I got my start and found my interest in science. And really building off of that foundation is even though I grew up near NASA, you would think that there would be all of these institutions of higher education, universities, because you would think NASA attracts all of these scientists, the best minds in the world, but really there's actually no colleges or universities around where I grew up. And so I started my education by going to community college. And I have here Brevard Community College, which is an excellent school. And I really credit all of my teachers there for really fostering my science learning and making sure that I was able to catch up to all of the other people there, and ultimately where I ended up here and at Yale is based on what I learned there. And I also wanted to highlight the Maxwell C. King Center, because even though I love science, I'm also a huge arts fanatic. I was also a choir kid growing up. So I have two modes to me. I'm very much involved in science, but I'm also a lover of the arts. And I was in choir all throughout basically elementary school, middle school, high school, and into college. So it's definitely possible to be in love with science and in love with art. So I definitely wanted to highlight both the community college aspect of my education and the arts aspect. So you can definitely love science and love art at the same time. You don't have to choose. And like I said, while the community college was definitely where I was able to kind of catch up with my classmates and get more of an education in science, it's still not enough for what I wanted to do. So I had to unfortunately pack up and move away from my family and all that I knew. I didn't move too far, as you can tell. I just moved a little bit further in to Winter Park, Florida. So that's in Central Florida near Orlando, for those of you who aren't familiar with all of the Florida cities. And so I went to Rollins College, which is somewhere that nobody knows. It's very tiny. And really I credit getting started in science research and being where I am today with my undergraduate advisor, Cassandra Riley. She is one of the best mentors I have ever had. And she is somebody who saw potential in me when I didn't see it, and was able to foster that potential throughout my career as an undergraduate. And so I really credit her with where I am today. So definitely, as you continue on throughout your own lives, definitely see who can be your mentor, and really identify how they can support you, because I wouldn't be where I am without her. And what I really liked about her lab was continuing on with the looking at tiny things. We studied the method of DNA, basically translating into what is your proteins. So this is called the central dogma, which it looks like it's super complicated, but it's basically taking your genetic material. So that's basically what makes you and unique, and you get it from your parents. And it tells your cells basically everything, like tells your cells what proteins to make. And so there's different steps. So there's this transcription cell. So it's basically your cells writing things down in order to translate them into something that your cells can actually read, and ultimately to make your proteins so that you can function properly. And so I studied this specific step with her. And so I very much was in line with the parasites, studying very tiny things. But I really credit this experience with getting me excited about science research, because mostly because of her mentorship and the support that she provided me as I was going. And then shifting gears again, this time I took a giant leap and I actually moved completely out of the state and to one of the biggest cities in the world. And I moved to New York City to start a research position at a different college. And so I worked at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine under the guidance of Dr. Kartik Chandran. And again, a wonderful mentor who saw my potential as somebody who had just graduated from college. And even though I thought I knew so much, I definitely didn't. And I had so much more to learn. And he saw that I had the potential to learn. And he took a chance on me and let me come into his lab and learn so much more from him. And also I had someone who came in at the same time as me, Tanwi Alkatkar, who is just a close friend of mine, and we applied to graduate school at the same time. So not only is she, I feel, a mentor to me, but also a friend and somebody who we support each other through the hardships of life and graduate school, and just being there for each other. So definitely this experience helped along those lines as well. And I got to go back to studying something that was super interesting to me because it's kind of similar to parasites. I was able to change directions and go into viruses. And so if anybody can pop into the chat what virus they think this is. It's a few years old, but you might have seen it in the news a couple years ago. Yeah, it's Ebola. So yeah, all of you are definitely on your current events. Sorry, I'm just trying to, yeah. So this is a terrible virus, and it caused a very significant outbreak in 2014 to 2016. And in our lab, we studied basically how to treat this virus. And one way that we can treat this, and you might be familiar with this, this term, I'm going to throw it up there. It might be complicated at first, but you might be familiar with it in the context of COVID-19 and the current pandemic, but we studied antibodies. So an antigen, which is at the top of the antibody picture, so that'll be like the virus. That's something that's foreign to your body. Your body is not familiar with it, and it attacks your body. And the antibody is something inside of your body that fights off that antigen. So it's defending your body against whatever is coming inside. And so we had a method to discover antibodies that were able to successfully neutralize or kill Ebola and other emerging viruses that were really deadly. So we were studying ways to combat these really horrific diseases in order to potentially have treatments in case there were any outbreaks, which is really timely for COVID-19, and Dr. Chandran and the lab are continuing and still studying the COVID-19 virus and other emerging viruses. So this is very timely research, and I was very excited to be a part of this lab. And also, of course, the mentorship was 100% on point and why I continued on in my career. And then just moving a little bit further north, coming here to New Haven, and then I joined, I changed directions a tiny bit. I'm still working on the same molecules of RNA, but I joined the lab of Susan Bizerga, and we study ribosomes. I gave her a little halo of ribosomes because she's kind of like the queen of this. She's been studying it for about 3 decades now. So she's a leading expert on this. And so basically we study how do our bodies make proteins. So you might have remembered that funny diagram that I showed you about the central dogma about getting from DNA to proteins in your cells. So basically we're studying this step, getting from RNA to proteins, and how your cells actually do that are using these machines called ribosomes. And our lab is really focused on how your body actually makes those ribosomes, and really focus on what happens when your body doesn't make them properly, because that can cause really rare genetic diseases. And we really hope to be able to treat those diseases. And again, it's just a pattern of finding really high quality mentors, because Susan is just one in a long line of really phenomenal mentors, that I would not be here without having really significant mentors in my life. So thank you all for listening, and I hope I can answer any questions that you have either about the science or about mentorship.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Cecilia, for your chat. Do we have any questions possible from the chat right now?
So
Yes.
Abraham asked, what other viruses did you learn about?
Yeah, so the other major virus that I studied was respiratory syncytial virus, which some of you might know about, but that's one that really affects infants a lot, infants and elderly people. So it causes a respiratory infection. And so we were trying to find an antibody that could treat that in infant populations and also in elderly populations. There's also Crimean Congo and Zika and a lot of tropical dengue, things like that. And there's also Marburg, so that's kind of, there's Ebola and then there's Marburg, those are hemorrhagic fever, those types of viruses. So lots of viruses. I really do love viruses. Thank you for that question. Oh, what parasites did I read about? My favorite was the guinea worm, because you have to pull it out with a pencil and wrap it around the pencil. And that's the one that I scared the author with because I said that was my favorite. There's also the tapeworms, there's botfly, there's some, yeah, really nasty ones. So definitely be careful. Be careful out there. I'm not studying COVID-19 right now. Right now I work on ribosomes, so we're not studying COVID-19, but I'm definitely interested in getting back into virus research. Yeah. Maya Bug is asking, what will we be doing in this class? Will we help in the antibody testing?
I think she's asking about you talk about antibodies in your talk. How can that kind of help with COVID?
Oh, okay, yeah. So, I think they might have. You might have. I mean, you might have heard of monoclonal antibodies. That might be a little bit too complex to talk about now, but so you can treat viruses with antibody. We call them cocktails. It's basically a mixture of antibodies to treat against viruses. So even if you already have the virus, so say even if you got the vaccine didn't work, and you just need a treatment for it. So this antibody can neutralize or kill the virus when it's already inside of you. And so that's why we were studying about the antibodies that can actually, after you've already been infected in the cells, neutralize that virus. Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah. I think one last question you get answered right now is from Cliff Zhang of, do people get infected when studying viruses? And I think to follow up on that, what safety measures do you take when studying viruses?
Yes, so people do get infected. There are definitely people who have been infected. You see it a lot more frequently when you're doing like animal work, when you have to inject them with needles, and you get needle pricks in your hands or something. That's a lot more common than like if you're doing cell culture work. But now the light is turning off. But yeah, there's a lot of safety measures. If you're working with high containment, like Ebola, then you have BSL-4, so that's biosafety level 4. So that means you have to have like negative airflow and all sorts of things, and you have to have protective gear. So you're wearing masks, you're wearing covering, you're all covered. You have to throw everything away. You have to like shower afterwards. So you're definitely well protected, and they're very rare, but they do happen, unfortunately. But thank you all for those questions, and I'm happy to answer them in the chat if you have more.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Cecilia. Again, we're gonna have a Q&A session at the end of the chat for other questions about the talks. I think I'm actually up now to talk. So I wanted to say thank you to everyone for showing up to this event. We did have some Zoom errors with the Zoom link registration. Thank you for those of you that showed up, and for everybody else seeing this on our YouTube channel, thank you for taking a look at the YouTube channel. We hope to keep and post these regularly for you to showcase amazing members like Cecilia. So I'm going to now hopefully give a talk that's half as good as what she just gave. So my talk is called Science from Coast to Coast. My name is Victor Olmos. I am in the LIM lab here at Yale, and I'm in the genetics department. And I just want to tell you about my story of science. So where am I from? I'm originally from California, in a very small city called Gilroy, California, with that little red star on it. And what are we? We are the garlic capital of the world. And before you ask it, yes, my city does smell like garlic. I can't smell the garlic because I was born there, but everyone else that visits my city tells me that yes, it smells like garlic. So I wanted to give you a timeline to just get a like rough estimate of like where my life is going. So I was born in 1996, and some of you may think I'm pretty old because yes, I'm old. And for about 14 years, I call these my pre-scientist years, in my opinion. And in this time, I was in middle school, high school, early high school era. And I wasn't really taking like too much science classes before it was required. But something happened around 2010 for me. And that was, before that, what I was doing back then, actually, instead of science, I was playing a lot of sports. I played baseball, played soccer, I did swimming, basketball. I played a lot of sports and tried them all. But again, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with life. I was still young, as many of you are. But in 2010, something happened, and that was Huntington's disease. And this is a picture of a Huntington disease brain. And I want you to go in the chat and try to guess which one has the disease and which one's healthy. So what do you guys think? Put your answer left, right. Which one do you think, which one?
Left.
Perfect. Good job. Yes, the left brain is the Huntington disease brain. And you can see that a lot smaller, a lot darker, and shrunken compared to a normal brain. So what is this disease that really inspired me at a young age to go into science? So before I even talk about the disease, I really want to say like why and who was affected in my family. And that was my grandpa. So my grandpa here, was really inspiration in my life. He helped me out a lot, helped take care and raise me as a kid. And over time, the disease really affected him. And this disease is very similar to one that you may know, Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. It affects your mental ability and your physical ability. And eventually my grandpa, who I saw as this giant of a human being, this amazing man, he eventually, became in a wheelchair and died from the disease a few years ago. And I, really hope that one day I can prevent other people's families from going through what I went through. This disease, called Huntington's disease, it's something that's dominantly inherited. What a dominantly inherited disease means is in your DNA, you have 2 copies. And if you have 1 copy, it means you have a disease. In simpler terms, it means you have a 50% chance of getting it if your parent has it. So if you get a coin and flip it, that could be your odds. This disease, it's progressive. What that means is when you're young, you don't show symptoms. But the older you get, the more symptoms you get. Again, very similar to a disease like Alzheimer's, which some of you may have in your family, or may know somebody that has it in their family. The age of onset, what this means is usually the disease shows when you're 30 to 50 years old. So some of you may have parents that are in that age range, and they, if they had the disease, will be showing the disease. It causes a loss of movement and thinking. And what it is if you look at DNA, this little image of DNA, there are base pairs. There are 4 bases in DNA, A, T, C, and G. And what DNA does, if you have those pairs in a certain order, they make amino acids that make proteins. And when you get these bases C, A, and G in a row, it makes an amino acid called glutamine. Now, scientists a long time ago thought, let's abbreviate glutamine as a Q. Why did they abbreviate a word that starts with a G as a Q? I will never know, but they did. And so this disease is also known as a poly-Q disease. Poly means many, so many Qs or many glutamines. Now you may be wondering, how many do you need for the disease? If you have more than 36 in a row, you would have the disease. Normally people have less than 36. You could have 6, you could have 30, you could have 25, and you wouldn't have the disease. But once you go above 36, you have the disease. And we're still working on trying to figure out, what causes it and how to treat this disease. There's currently no cure and not even a treatment for this disease. And so learning all this at a young age really inspired me to I want to try to cure my family. I want to work on something that can help my family. And growing up, I was still in high school, 2010, 2014. And going back to where I lived in Gilroy, we were surrounded by fields. There was no college nearby in my city that I could go to and take science classes. There weren't outreach opportunities in my city. So what did I do back then is I wrestled, because I was able to do good sport, and I knew that eventually I want to get to college, but there wasn't the best education system in where I grew up. And so what I was always told at a young age was do a sport and they'll get you to college. And so I did a sport, and eventually, helped me get to college. But one other thing I want to mention before I even got to college was my mentor, one of the biggest mentors in my life. This person, her name is Maricela Olmos, who actually happened to be my sister. Now, she is 3 years older than me, and she is first generation, just as I am. Our parents were teenage parents who never finished high school. We never had somebody in family that went to college, and my sister was really the pioneer of the family. She took high school for the first time, college for the first time. She went to the University of California, Davis, and even did a master's at University of Santa Clara. And she showed me that it was possible, that even if you have teenage parents, if you're first generation, she really showed me that it was possible to do everything. So I don't think I'd be here today without the support of my sister, my family, my parents. People you students here right now are here probably because your parents, maybe saw this newsletter and thought you should come to the event. So after this talk, make sure you go and thank, your family for helping you get to hopefully, get to college or do something that you really want to do. So I sure want to put that out there. So with the help of my sister and my family, I was able to get to college, and this is called College Part 1. I've been in college for a while now. I went to Stanford, which is in California, 1 hour from home. So it was really nice to be close to home. My parents could visit me if they wanted to. I worked in a lab with this man. His name was Dr. Marius Warnig, and I worked on stem cells. And many of you may have heard about stem cells and the potential treatments they have. And when I was young, I heard a lot of stories about stem cells. They can cure everything. And so I really wanted to join a stem cell lab. And so when I joined college, I joined a stem cell lab, and I was super excited. So excited, in fact, that I stayed for another year, for 5 years. I did a master's, and I was actually able to get some papers out and put my name out there. And, wow, I could do science. And after 5 years of college, I still have no idea what I'm doing sometimes. I think I do, and then sometimes science reminds me that maybe I don't. And that's okay, because every day in science is a new day, and I'm learning new things. And you try, you succeed, you try, you fail, and that's life and that's science. And I didn't let that, I didn't let that bring me down. I did, though, however, decide to do College Part 3, and that's me now at Yale. So I'm going to be here at Yale for maybe 3, maybe 4 more years in my College Part 3. I'm now at Yale University, working under Dr. Jang-Hoo Lim, and I'm a part of Yale SACNAS. And I'm very, very happy to be here to give you this talk, and hopefully many, many other talks showcasing our members. So what do I do here at Yale is I work with mice. And this is a little diagram showing kind of what I do. I put mice almost on a little treadmill, and they walk on it until they get tired and then they fall off. And why do I do that? Because my family disease, that brain I showed you earlier, it affects your motor function. And I really try to model diseases like that in mice to try to understand how to cure it in a mouse. Maybe we can cure it in a human. So what do I do here at Yale? Well, my family disease, I kept saying Huntington's, it's actually only 1 of 9. The disease I work on here at Yale is called SCOT1. It's very similar. It's still an expansion disease. And these are the names of the other ones. I can't pronounce that big name, so I'm just gonna call it DRPLA. I'm a biology person, not an English person, so it's hard for me to say that one. But then there's Huntington's disease, SBMA, also a little difficult for me to say. And then there are six,
Your slides are stuck.
excuse me?
Your slides are stuck.
Oh, they are?
Yeah, I'm still seeing the one with your sister.
Oh, goodness gracious. So I'm sorry about that, everybody. I did college, recap, did Stanford, I published, no idea what I was doing for a bit. I had this cute diagram you didn't see apparently. So I'm just gonna pause on that for a second because apparently even on Zoom, I have no idea what I'm doing. Science is still haunting me today. So going on further now, my college part 3, I'm here at Yale, working with Dr. Jenku Lim at SACNAS. And here now is a diagram, hopefully you can see what I was talking about. We put mice on this little treadmill until they walk on it until they get tired and they fall off. Going forward, yet again, we have these many different diseases, and I'm working on SCA1, not my family's disease. And the reason I'm not working on my family disease yet is because I'm still learning. I don't think a full scientist maybe. Maybe you think I'm a scientist, but I don't know if I'm ready yet to work on a disease that's very personal to me. So I'm gonna leave you with one question is, am I a scientist yet? Now that you've seen kind of my whole life, where I started to where I am, would you think I'm a scientist? At what point would you think I was a scientist? If you think I was a scientist back in high school or back in middle school, because I knew I wanted to do something, what about yourself? Are you a scientist? When do you think you're going to be a scientist? And that's what I want to leave you with is, anybody can really be a scientist no matter what your background. And I hope we kind of showed some of that today. So thank you. And I'll be taking any questions you have in the chat. And I wanted to apologize again for many of the technical difficulties that happened tonight.
So Abraham in the chat asks you both, what is it that you love the most? I guess, about science or, your experience so far.
I'll take this one first. I love that every day is new. I'm the kind of person that if I do the same thing over and over, I get bored. And science every day is new. It's never repetitive, and every day is an adventure. It's just brand new. Whether it turns out great or bad, it's still just something new. So that's what I love the most about my science.
Yeah, I love the freedom to be able to explore different topics and being able to learn new things all the time. So, being a scientist, you get the tools to be able to read papers, and even if it's not your particular field, you can still understand it, so you can take away new knowledge. And I always think that's really cool, being able to learn new stuff.
Okay, I'm gonna answer a question I see from the chat about when's the longest time a mouse has gone before falling. So what we do is we put the mice on a treadmill, a little device, and it starts slow, like a little slow speed, and it gets faster and faster and faster. And it depends, the mice, if they have a disease, they fall off pretty quickly. Maybe they last 10 seconds, maybe they last 2 minutes. Sometimes the mice that don't have a disease, they can last 10 minutes. At that point, we stop it. So I actually don't know the longest the mouse will go for because I don't want to sit there for 30 minutes if the mouse will go for 30 minutes. Maybe it's a little marathon running mice. I don't want to be there the whole time watching the mouse run, as cute as it may be. And another question I see about how to treat brain diseases. That's a very good question. We do cut brains open. We get human brains and mouse brains. Obviously, there are big differences between them, the size and, we're using human diseases. But to treat a disease, it's hard. We're still working on it. There's not many brain diseases we've worked on. Some of the reasons are it's hard to, if you take a medicine, you usually ingest it through the mouth, you eat it, and it goes through your body. Well, to get stuff to your brain, there's a little bit of material called a membrane. It's basically tissue in your body that protects your brain from the rest of your body. And to get drugs that you take to try to treat your disease from your bloodstream into your brain is very, very difficult. So treating, we take many, many years. I've been in my PhD 2 full years. And some diseases take a very long time to treat, maybe 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Science is not a very fast process. Maybe some of you, will go into science and help my family. That'd be amazing. Hopefully one of you might see this talk and think, let me help that guy out and his family. And to answer another question, yes, my family disease is very rare. It's not very common. And there are many other rare diseases out there that scientists work on. And the last question I'll answer real quick, sorry, Cecilia, about dementia. Dementia affects your thinking and memory. And so some of you may have seen that in older family members. People have a hard time remembering maybe a loved one. They might not remember their own child. It's not that they don't love you, it's just that the neurons in their brain and other things that happen deteriorate. There's issues with that. And many scientists are working on that. It's a very, very popular field to work on. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's a question that's basically, when did you feel like a scientist, which I think Victor kind of touched on in his talk. And yeah, I think I go back and forth sometimes when I do and don't feel like a scientist. I think the first time that I really did feel like a scientist was, I guess there are two answers. One was the first time I got an email that called me Dr. Harold. and when I was like, oh, maybe somebody thinks that I have a PhD or an MD or something, and they think I'm a doctor. So that made me feel like a scientist for a day. But really, I think the first time was when I went to a conference. I was fortunate enough to go to a conference at the end of my undergraduate and be able to present my work as like a poster. So basically, you get a big poster and you present all of your data that you've done. And that's for anybody to attend. So it can be somebody who's been doing work for like 40 years in your field. So they can come up to your poster and talk to you, and that's super intimidating sometimes. Or it can be somebody who is also only a senior in college talking to you about your work. And so being able to communicate to all of those different people made me feel like a scientist, because I could effectively talk to different people on different levels about my work. And I was the expert because it's my work. And that made me feel like a scientist. And I struggle with that every day, whether I feel like a scientist or not. But when it's your work, you definitely feel like one, because you're the person who knows it the most. And I'll let Victor answer whether he feels like one.
Oof. So there are definitely, like you said, days I feel like a scientist and some days I don't. I recently just got an undergrad that's going to work with me. And what that means is an undergrad is somebody in college, their first time. So I've gone to college part 3 now. I have somebody in college part 1 still working with me. And I'm teaching them how to do things, and they've never done science before. They've never done a lot of experiments or handled some lab equipment before. And I'm teaching them right now how to do everything for the first time. And it's really amazing feeling that, somebody trusts me to teach them, whether I feel like a scientist or not, doesn't matter. I am a scientist in their eyes. So being a mentor to somebody has really solidified that, yes, I'm a scientist. So I think that's just been like a really big solidifying moment in my life now. Yeah. Do we have any other questions from the chat? Violet, do you have any other questions for us?
Yeah, I think one that was talked about a little bit briefly was doing science and having other interests outside of science. I know it was briefly talked about music. So how do you nurture kind of both? Because you guys are both obviously pursuing science, maybe primarily, but how do you keep alive those hobbies and interests? Because that seems like it could be hard.
Okay. So a few fun things I like to do is I like to go rock climbing. I try to do something physical. I play a lot of board games. So I like playing board games with my friends, and I play a lot of video games. That's a great way to de-stress for me. As a kid, I was really encouraged by my parents. If you got your homework done, you can play video games. And so I would get my homework done because I wanted to play video games. So any parents watching, it's a great motivator if your kid likes video games. But I do also like to read. I don't do music myself because I have a hard time playing instruments. But I like listening to music. So anything you like to do, I think can be fun. I don't know. Video games, board games, that's my kind of thing. Cecilia?
Yeah, I definitely, I mean, I stopped music after college, but yeah, like I used to play with the violin, I used to do choir, but yeah, school definitely takes a lot of time, and so does research, but it is important to find time for hobbies, and outside of the lab, I do a lot of I do a lot of stuff. Recently I've taken up like swimming, and finding time for that is good, and I like the piece of like doing the backstroke because I can't hear anything because my ears are like submerged, and so it's like I zone out of the world for a little while. And I also play video games like Victor. So that's also a nice time to just like not look at my computer or do an experiment. And like I said in my talk, like I come from, my sister is still a children's librarian. So I credit her with my love of reading. And my mom was a librarian as well, in when I was in high school. So I come from a line of librarians, I guess. So I still like to read, but I definitely have less time now to read non-science stuff. Yeah.
Cecilia, we actually got an interesting question from Joshua R. It says, if you didn't become a scientist, where would you be instead?
That's a good question. I don't know where I would be. I probably would have been an art historian. Other, I didn't major in it, but I minored in it, and that was kind of my other career trajectory. Yeah.
I'm kind of similar. I would be like a historian. I like ancient Greece and Rome and mythology. So I always joke that if I wasn't, if I didn't have the disease to inspire me, I might be a classicist. Disney Hercules really inspired me as a kid. Amazing movie.
Yeah.
Love the music in it. So, those of you watching, even if you don't want to go into science, it doesn't mean art isn't, art is totally a great field to work in, history, all of those fields are great. And we really just want you to follow your passion, whatever it may be. And I think we can actually end it there. It's 6:55. So thank you again, everyone who came to our event. We really appreciate you coming. And we hope we see you October 23rd. Again, hands-on demo by our group, Art They Inc., and another organization. It's free to attend. You get your own little demo kit, and you can learn more about science with us that way. So thank you, everyone. We really hope you enjoy this, and we hope to be doing these talks.
Will we be getting will we be getting an email on this?
If you go to Art They Inc.'s website, you can sign up for it right now. And Art They Inc. will be sending out emails for you for that. For our talks, hopefully, we can do these talks again. We want to give talks for more of our members beyond me and Cecilia, so that you see all the other amazing scientists. And if you didn't see yourself in one of us today, maybe our pathway wasn't what you're going through right now. Maybe other members are going through what you're going through or doing what you're doing. So maybe you'll see yourself in one of them. And we hope to give this talk more in the future. Hopefully we fix all the issues with Zoom, screen sharing. So thank you for dealing with me. Zoom, even after a year and a half of using it, still has a way to mess up. But we hope to show these on our YouTube channels that you can share if you like it, share with your friends, show it to your parents and family. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.